Welcome to the second Throwback Thursday. Today we are looking at Final Fantasy EdVenture, released in 1997, written by Luke Drellick under his mantle of Dookie Incorporated. The plot doesn't make very much sense to just describe outright, which is why I didn't actually start with it this time. And rather than giving my own impressions of this game this time, this is not something I want to resort to very often, but there is a review here on Digital MegaZeux written by Lancer X, who has written some amazing MegaZeux games such as Eternal Eclipse, Taya Rin, and Red. And I'm actually going to go ahead and read this, because it's very much in detail. Written in 2011. All told, probably one of Drellick's weaker games, but amid the ridiculous plot and the repetitive gameplay, there's quite a lot to like about this game. Final Fantasy EdVenture bills itself as a parody of the Final Fantasy series. On the whole, it is not a particularly skillful parody, though there are some amusing moments. It actually stands up better as a game than as a parody, and it is perhaps to its credit considering Drellick's other work around the same era, such as Second Setsu Blade of Islam, that it doesn't take itself too seriously. Graphical quality varies quite a bit. It's not bad for 1996-1997, though not as good as the graphics in Blade of Islam. The chief issue is really the use of garish colors, probably most blatant in some of the indoor levels, such as Satan's Lab, being easily the worst offender. Other levels have different levels of visual quality, ranging from alright, such as Cleft of Dementia, Forest of Licks, to quite good, such as Mount Calvin or Mana Cactus. The world map looks decent, with some nice shadow work going on around mountainous regions. The CGs, the still graphics used in cutscenes and in boss fights, also vary, but several of them look quite nice. It's sometimes a bit hard to tell exactly what you're looking at, though, especially in the boss fights. Music selection is reasonable and inoffensive. Most of the tunes are quite nice, and none spoil the atmosphere. Sound effect selection is at times a little more problematic, but allowing for the fact that it is purportedly a comedy game, not too unexpected. The sound effect that plays when you enter or exit a room sure is annoying, though, as I'm sure you've heard several times in the video so far. Oh yeah, you quickly get sick of the pain sound on taking damage in boss fights too. Gameplay, at least most of the gameplay, I'll get to boss fights in a moment, is most kindly described as default. You fight a relatively small range of built-in enemies with unlimited built-in bullets. They aren't even a particularly challenging selection, or used in an interesting way, see Fallen. So these enemies essentially amount as nondescript things that get in your way as you clear through the levels. This is not necessarily that much of a bad thing. If shooting built-ins was so horrible, we'd never get through Forest of Ruin, and you can certainly do far worse, taking away the default bullets and giving the player a horrid sword engine after the first third, for example, see Blade of Islam. It doesn't exactly make for engaging gameplay, though, with one exception, Satan's Lab, which features the most dreaded built-in MegaZeux has to offer, the Invulnerable Ghost. Eesh. On the whole, though, levels just feel like a chore you have to get through. Rather than healing up through pickups, you can use healing items you've previously acquired through treasure chests scattered throughout the levels and by buying from shops and towns. Each town has an NPC that will exchange score for coins, giving a good reason to hunt down those built-ins, because the items can be quite essential. Boss fights are conducted through a 1v1 boss system, similar to the final boss's of engine in Blade of Islam, although this battle engine offers a good deal more variety due to having variable stats, spells, etc. Being 1v1, there's relatively little room for strategy here, and your chance of getting through the battles is fairly strongly dependent on the stats you allocated at the start of the game. Magic is the only way you can efficiently do damage to these bosses, so it's really the only thing you want to use. The graphic used for the bosses is a full screen image in the same style as the cutscene graphics described before, so they vary in quality but generally look quite nice. Pretty much all spell effects are just a palette change, and a single frame of overlay, less detailed than the ones in the original engine, but this has far more spells. You acquire spells throughout the game by finding them in treasure chests. The main highlight of the game is honestly the progression. The game is lengthy, 191 boards, has a variety of locations, and the sort of branching narrative not seen again until Bernard the Bard in 1998. Broadly speaking, the game has two main routes, the branching point being whether or not you try to visit a nondescript cave while heading to another location. If you don't, what you get is essentially the canon story, which is fairly straightforward and covers the quest to get the Japanese video game companies of Squaresoft and Unix to release their games in English. If you do visit the cave, you get a longer, more interesting quest that consists of a sequence of towns and gameplay levels at first, and branches out, letting you explore the larger world and take one of the 4 different paths to the final dungeon. This affects the ending you get, although there isn't always a coherent link story-wise between the route you took and the ending you get. The final dungeon is the same for both overall routes, and there are a total of 5 endings, one of the first route and 4 for the second route. While there are certainly better ways to kill a couple of hours, I'd probably recommend the engine games and the Con remakes over this. Overall, it is enjoyable and engaging enough to keep you interested enough to play until the end, and there's certainly plenty to see and do here. So, that is Final Fantasy EdVenture, guys. All in all, definitely worth a look. It's getting 4.5 stars on digital MegaZeux, and it is part of the Gold Collection. Definitely one of the larger MegaZeux games ever conceived, really, ranging at 4 MZX worlds to it. It is enormous, and I would say it is worth your time.